All right, yesterday we talked about how come it's likely that we will probably have conflict with other nations because of our expansion, our trading all over the world, being allies with some that are enemies with our allies, so that could cause problems. And then we started talking about issues that were leading us to war, and we just got into one of those issues. And what was the one issue we talked about yesterday that will eventually lead us to war, Abby?
They were kidnapping our sailors.
Yep, they're kidnapping our sailors, and another word for kidnapping that they used was what? Hunter, what's another word for kidnapping that we used? All right, Austin? Impressment, okay? And so Jefferson decided against going to war, and instead of going to war, I guess, what was it that he decided to do instead of going to war? Dev?
Just stay against him.
Right, he was against it, and what did he decide to do instead, Max?
The Embargo Act of 1807.
All right, he wanted to do something peaceful, if he could. So, along with kidnapping our sailors, they were interfering with our shipping by doing that, seizing our ships. So a second issue is they're interfering with our shipping, both the French and the British. And so Jefferson wanted to try to do this peacefully, and he went to Congress and asked them to pass, what did you say, Max?
The Embargo Act of 1807.
Right. So Congress passed this Embargo Act of 1807. All right, and this is going to, what he thought he would do is use trade as a weapon against these countries that were messing with our trading. So if he could use trade as a weapon, he thought that this would solve the problem. So, Brett, what is the Embargo Act? What did it say that could happen? There's like two things it stated. What was one of them? Brett Swallow.
Oh, it took away, it closed down the ports.
Basically closed down the ports.
And then we wouldn't accept British ships anymore.
Right, so one thing it stated was the American ships were no longer allowed to sail to foreign ports, so we weren't able to leave and trade, we weren't able to, leave and trade with foreign ports. And then the second thing he said was it closed ports to, American ports to British, so the British couldn't even come and bring anything to us, and we couldn't leave and export goods, so no exporting and importing happening. And this policy that was passed, it was Jefferson's idea. What was the reaction by the American people? What did they think of this policy? Cooper?
Well, they wanted to go to war.
They wanted to go to war instead of doing this peaceful act. But what was their reaction to the act itself? The fact that they couldn't trade, basically. What was their response to this, their reaction? How did they feel? Abby?
Some of them, didn't they lie and go to some...
Some of them lied and said, they violated it and stated, well, we're going over this place, and then they would eventually go somewhere else and do the trading. But, so, when I say reaction, I mean, did they like it? Did they dislike it? Lily? Most of them didn't like it. And why didn't they like it? Think about what is happening here. Why didn't they like it, Austin?
Because they couldn't sell their goods.
They couldn't sell their goods anymore. What else couldn't they do, Lindsay?
They couldn't provide for their families.
Couldn't provide for their families because now they're not making an income. So they're really upset with this. Okay, his policy was just a disaster. It was a big mess. And basically, one of the quotes they said was, it's like cutting one's throat to cure a nosebleed. Okay, a nosebleed is minor, right? Yes? No? A nosebleed is minor, and cutting a throat would be quite major, right? So they're saying you're making a bigger problem to solve a smaller problem, is what they're stating. So this Embargo Act became a big issue in the next election, the election of 1808. Okay, Thomas Jefferson has served his 8 years. He's done. Who will become the 4th president? John? James Madison. Now I just have it down as a picture here. Number 4 being James Madison. You might want to get that jotted down so that you know that he is the 4th president. So James Madison, 4th president. He'll serve from 1809 to 1817. Abby?
Isn't Jefferson part of the the Republican group? Or is he?
Democrat, Republican?
Yeah.
Yes.
So why, like, weren't his people supposed to be more calm and not for more war as much as?
Yes and no, but because of the fact that they were harming our people, that's why they wanted war. They wanted to protect the citizens. Okay. This Embargo Act didn't last long. Congress basically repealed it by the time James Madison even took office. But he tried to solve the problem too, and so he passed a law. And what was his law? What was the law that James Madison passed to try to solve this problem of them interfering with our shipping and our sailors? What was the problem he came up with, Megan? What was his solution?
To allow the merchants to trade with any country except France.
Right. So he said, okay, now you guys can trade elsewhere, but you can't trade with France and Britain. So those were our biggest trading partners. So they said, well, if these two countries, respect us and respect our shipping, then we'll be allowed to trade with them. Well, was this law much better or worse, or what was it, Dev?
It was just legal, it didn't really affect anyone.
Yeah. What's that? Say that again.
Said it really didn't affect anyone. Or
It did affect people, actually. It wasn't any more effective than Jefferson's plan, so it was just as bad. They didn't like this one just the same. Okay? So now we've got two kind of issues that are leading us to war. Impressment of our soldiers and sailors and citizens, interfering with our shipping, and then there's going to be this one more that's going to upset the people as well. So we're looking at the Native American part here. On 328. And so what is happening in the Native American community, I guess, out west, that's upsetting us now? What's going on here in the Native American country, I suppose? What can you tell me about what's going on there? Bo, what's going on out west?
war hogs?
No. What can you guys tell me? What's going on with the Native Americans? Abby?
They were also mad at Britain. So.
Well, the Native Americans were not mad with Britain, no. Austin, is your hand up?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It says that the British were stirring up the Native Americans.
Yes. The British were stirring up the Native Americans, getting them all riled up and upset with us. Okay? So the Native Americans are starting to rally, and they want to kind of fight with us because they're upset that we're taking their land, they say. So the British are jumping in and starting to stir things up. You've always, some of you guys have friends that do that, And so there's a chief called Tecumseh. His name is, he's a Shawnee chief, Tecumseh, and he's trying to stop the loss of Native American land. And the British are helping him. They're getting them all rallied up. And they think that they can help each other out and get people to stop the land. So the problem we're having right now is the fact that the British are supporting this Native American resistance. The British are becoming friends again with the Native Americans. And the British are using them. They're just getting them stirred up. Hunter, got your book open? Okay. They're getting them all stirred up. They're just using them because they want some more help fighting us. So there were some battles that took place, and obviously their efforts to rally and defeat us, they failed. So the British kind of worked their way up to Canada. Tecumseh's up in Canada. So now the British are hanging around Canada. All right? So why don't you look over on 329. And if you look on 329, there's a chart there, the three major causes that led us to war. Impressment of soldiers, interference with shipping, and the British support of the Native American resistance. All right? So everybody up in Canada is welcoming the British, welcoming these natives, and now we're kind of upset and a little bit worried with them being up in Canada. All right? There's a group of people called Warhawks. And, Stephanie, what are Warhawks?
Westerners who called for war.
Yeah, Westerners who called for war. So there's a congressman from Kentucky named Henry Clay, and he's really upset. He's demanding war. And this group out west call themselves Warhawks. They're a group of people just basically demanding war. They wanted the British to stop helping the Native Americans, and they wanted the British out of Canada. Why do they want the British out of Canada? Why do you think they want British out of Canada? Brett?
Because that would open up more room to start an empire.
Yeah, it would open up more room for us because we wanted that land. Get the British out of there. Okay, so besides Henry Clay and these warhawks, there's a lot of others that are wanting war as well. Andrew Jackson, he will become president eventually one day. He's urging on wartime, and he says we need to do this to protect our citizens. We need to do it to protect our citizens, protect our ships. We need to help our country, our trade market. We need to get that going. So he kind of helps Congress and urges them on, and war is finally declared. June 18th, 1812. All right, let me give you some little info about James Madison. He's our new president. He's the first president that has ever asked Congress to declare war. Okay, so this is a little fact for you. He's the first president. Well, now he is the smallest president ever. He was 5'4" and he was 100 pounds. He's just a little guy. He's the only president to have faced enemy fire because during the War of 1812, the British attacked the White House, set it on fire. So he, was faced fire. He was the first congressman to ever become president. First president in history to ask Congress for a declaration of war. His wife was taller than him. Star Spangled Banner was written during his administration. He was the Secretary of State under Thomas Jefferson. The White House used to be known as the Executive Mansion, and during his presidency, it changed from the Executive Mansion to the White House. He dressed in pretty much only black. His wife, this is nasty, his wife liked to chew tobacco, and she also liked to gamble. His wife was the first person to send a message using Morse code. He died of heart failure at the age of 85. Indiana became a state during his presidency. He studied the Bible a lot. At one point in time, he was turned down for a loan from the Bank of the United States when he was desperate for money. He liked to read Greek and Latin. He was related to FDR. Only president who had 2 vice presidents die in office. And he was also diagnosed with epilepsy. Okay. So, a little information about James Madison, our 4th president. So now you got 1 through 4. I'll get a picture of him up there for you. Okay, so we've got this. It's led on to war. We are now in war. The War of 1812 will only take about 1 section up in the book. The next section, we'll go through it. There's basically 2 phases of war. There's kind of this phase of on the water, basically around the coast and the lakes, and then the second one goes a little bit more into land. So we'll go through this, and this is the second and final time we will fight the British. All right, and then we'll go into, there's 3 major effects that the war left on the country. We'll talk about those as well. So what I need you to do right now, get that writing assignment out that was due today. Okay, so your question was, how did the Embargo Act affect the American farmer? So tell me, how did it affect the American farmer? Abby?
This affected farmers because they lost important markets for grain, cotton, and tobacco. Also, they lost income.
Okay, yeah, income being a big one. They lost goods and stuff coming in. They lost big income. Anything else that they possibly, how it affected them? Can you tell me anything else? Jacob?
They lost their crops.
They lost their crops. They weren't able to export goods. They weren't able to import goods. They lost income because of this. All right, it affected them tremendously. What I want you to do